Okay, good morning to all of you. People online again, good morning. We're going to resume our class now. Yesterday and day before yesterday, we've done 2 lectures in the GS Foundation course, that is KAVACH Plus. We're doing the subject of international relations. Lecture number 1, lecture number 2 is still live on YouTube. Today we're going to start with lecture 3. Till now, if you recall, the very first class we had seen basically what is foreign policy, right? What is a state? What is a nation? We had seen terms like what is national interest, what is power, different facets of power, right? And we had understood, for example, what is strategic autonomy. Okay, when I say strategic autonomy, what comes to your mind? Independent decision making. Okay, any movement that also comes to your mind when I say strategic autonomy? NAM. Okay, yesterday we had spoken about NAM. Okay, and we had seen the 5 founding fathers of NAM. Okay, we'll start with first. Any one person was founded NAM? Hint from India? Nehru. Chalo. For 4 remaining. Second one. Tito. Chalo. Tito also works. 2 people. Third. Sukarno. Fourth. Nkrumah. Fifth. Nasir. Okay, we've seen 5 people. And we had seen Belgrade. Okay, today, in fact, will first start with NAM because in the past also we've seen questions on NAM. In 2027 and beyond, the questions on NAM would be more futuristic in nature, which means what is the future of NAM? Whether is it relevant in the current times or not, that is what we will see, right? So that is what we had seen. In yesterday's lecture, we talked about 2 major things. One is determinants of foreign policy. Is history a determinant? Right? Can ideas determine foreign policy? Ideas and values? Then we'd seen geography. Okay, in geography, we will take 1 minute to revise our last class. Fine. We had seen a quote of Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji. What had he said? We can change our friends, but we cannot change our neighbors. Okay, that is what we had seen. Then we had seen, for example, India's geography. For example, we have a long coastline, big boundaries on the continental side. That also determines our foreign policy. In fact, that also tells you why neighborhood first becomes important for us. Okay. Then we had seen, for example, very specific case of China. China's project was Belt and Road, which started way back in 2013. So now that project is almost completing 13 years, right? Belt and Road has 2 components. Belt means it has maritime also, it has land-based components also, both. It is an infrastructure project. But the challenge is the project can have a dual use infrastructure, right? This is a keyword, that is the challenge, right? Then after that, we had seen China's string of pearls. What is string of pearls? Yes, very good. String of pearls can lead to strategic encirclement of India. Okay. Now, for that, I told you 4 things, 4 locations of China. Sabse pehla, Djibouti. Where is Djibouti? Horn of Africa. And Horn of Africa is 4 countries. Seed. S is Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Djibouti. First is this. Second one is Gwadar. Gwadar is in Pakistan. And Gwadar, in which project had we seen? CPEC. Gwadar connected to Kashgar of China. Fine. Second. Third. Chalo, I'll give you the country, you'll tell me the port. Sri Lanka. Hambantota port. Okay. And fourth one, country is Myanmar. Chuakpyu port, something like that. 4 points we had seen. And the counter to this also we had seen. Counter by India's necklace of diamonds. Now 4 locations we had seen. First one was Chabahar port. Which country? Iran. Second, Duqm port. Which country? Oman. Third one, also relevant for current affairs point of view. It was in news in July 2026. Sabang. Where is Sabang port? Indonesia. And India is also, of course, giving BrahMos and Astra missiles to Indonesia. And the fourth one was Agalega. Where is Agalega? Mauritius. You have to again try to recall some of these points. So that is geography. After geography, we had seen the economic aspect will also determine foreign policy. We had seen leadership, also determining foreign policy. And last thing was the environment, right? Which is the Cold War, post-Cold War, all of that part, also determining foreign policy, right? So people who are watching, I think you have already seen and done these aspects with me. Then we had gone to 6 phases of Indian foreign policy. Dr. S. Jaishankar. First phase, 1947 to 62. This was moral idealism, okay, optimistic non-alignment. Fine. Second phase, realism and recovery. That is 62 to 71. Now, from 71 to 91, what is this? Greater regional assertion. Why? Because 3 major events had happened. One is treaty with Soviet Union. Second, India's decisive role in Bangladesh. And third one was, yes, 1974, Pokhran 1. The moment Pokhran 1 happened, which group was formed? NPT, Pakka? Bagad mein? NPT, because your friend is saying so. Next. What is the answer? The moment this test was done, which group was formed? Which is what we had written in a note, in a box. Answer is NSG. NPT was formed in 1970. NSG as a voluntary group of 48 members was formed after Pokhran 1 was concluded, which is why I am telling you, this creates a confusion to many people. Fine. Then, after this, we had seen, for example, 4 export control regimes. I hope you remember that. Tell me the 4 names. Now, everybody is looking, ki, sir, we had done this class in 1846. Let us find our notes. Huh? MTCR, then Vasenar, Australia Group, and NSG. How many groups is India part of? 3, and we have written 3/4. It means 3 out of the 4 India is a part of. That we had seen. Fine. Then, other phases we had seen from 1991 to 1998. This was preserving our strategic autonomy. Then we had gone from almost 98 to 2013. Okay, in this, India was a balancing power. Of course, our weight has increased, but not to the extent that we become a huge big power. Is that clear? Right? And from 2014 onwards, what do we see? Energetic diplomacy. Right? What is energetic diplomacy? More outreach. So for example, Look East had become Act East, more focus on the neighborhood, and overall focus on multi-alignment. In fact, we ended the last class with a quote of Dr. S. Jaishankar. Okay? How should India deal with US and other countries, for example? Right? That is what we had seen. Fine. So again, the point is, whenever any class happens, please try to spend some 30-40 minutes. That is helpful. Today, there are a few things I will be telling you. Very first thing is a very short question we will look into is NAM. And basically, I want to just quickly cover what is the relevance of NAM. Okay? This question can always come. And when I see the relevance of NAM, we also need to know any recent summit which has happened, etc. And based on that, we can talk about it. So first topic will be NAM. Second topic, some people who are watching online also wanted to know. They may have heard terms like so I'll be telling you these terms also after I'm done with NAM. After this, we see a very brief discussion on globalization. Then I go to India's doctrines. And here we see all the major doctrines of India, right from neighborhood first policy. In the last class, I told you, for example, Panchsheel we had done, Gujarat doctrine, etc. Here I'll be expanding on it. And the moment we are done with this, then we go into each theater. Then we go into, for example, India's neighborhood. Fine. So with this, I will segue into India's neighborhood. And here I will be also telling you frameworks to make your job easier. Sometimes it feels, how should I cover countries, for example? But here we will see some common issues across countries. That will also give you some clarity on how to cover these aspects. Fine. Now, topic number 1 and 3, okay, have appeared sometimes without any context in your mains exam. When you don't expect a question on NAM, they ask you. Normally, what people do for mains, for IR, they think let us only do current and that is enough. If you see the paper of 2025, this year's mains, okay, you will see questions even on globalization from a very theoretical perspective. Right? That, for example, right now, today I'll tell you, for example, when Trump says MAGA, making America great again, when UK exits from EU, you know something known as Brexit. What is the status of globalization in 21st century? Do I say globalization, for example, when we say in India, make in India? When we have production linked incentive schemes, for example. So we want to see what is the status of globalization in the 21st century. Okay. So that we will be looking for very shortly. Okay. Let us first start with NAM. So NAM is actually a grouping which is created to exercise strategic autonomy, right? The context here was the bipolarity of Cold War. Okay. So the countries did not want to join any of the groups, and to prevent doing that, they created something known as NAM. Okay. Now, what I need to know for NAM here is, of course, the context is this. Second, founders we've already completed, so you'll try to remember. I've written 5. Now, this part is important. Some people only think of NAM as a movement. Okay, that is correct. But you also have to know NAM as a philosophy, which is why even though the movement may decline, because the conditions of bipolarity do not exist right now, the philosophy remains. What is the philosophy? What is the idea here? This philosophy may remain, the movement may decline. So whenever you get a question on the relevance of NAM, you can specify by saying that NAM must be looked into at 2 aspects. First aspect is as a movement. Now the movement will always be rooted in its history and the context. What is the history and the context of NAM? It was set up in the bipolarity of Cold War. Nobody can deny that, right? That is the main idea that was being there. We have the 5 founding members that we've had a look at. So one thing is this, okay, many people will say that NAM is a dustbin of history, or is now present only in the graveyard, for example, right? Of course, very extreme words I'm saying. So why is that? They are saying the historical conditions that were responsible for its creation do not exist right now. Okay. So that question then often comes, that is it relevant or not? The question on relevance is that question only. Okay. Now, if we know till here that NAM is both a movement and NAM is both a philosophy, we also need to know the objectives for which NAM stood for. So I'll see the objectives, then I'll go to the contributions, and then I'll go into the relevance of it. Now, when I look at the objectives, right? as a movement, what will be the objective of NAM? One objective is very obvious, to help exercise independent decision making. But other than that, what will it talk about? Any idea? Whatever we have discussed, I will of course tell you points. Anything but what would be the objective of NAM? Will it have any economic objective? Trade partnerships, okay. Anything else? Sorry? Peaceful cooperation, good. Anything else? See, look into just go into the history and context. What was the challenge? Colonialism. What was the challenge? Imperialism. What was the challenge? Wars, arms race, right? Exploitation of developing by developed nations. So its objective will be rooted in this. So what are some of the objectives of philosophy? It will focus on anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, support for peace, support for non-violent movements, and it will also emphasize economic decolonization. And in fact, NAM will say that political decolonization is incomplete without economic decolonization. And for that, you have to understand many times what happens. Let's say the Britishers left a colony, but even MNCs are still there. Now, MNCs are looting all the resources. They're not giving anything in much in return. What is that? This is also exploitation. So NAM as a movement also tells you about this. So when I look into the objectives of NAM, so NAM's objectives will be on all these fronts. Okay? Yes. Protecting nation sovereignty is also one of the objectives which NAM will talk about. So when I'm saying objectives, if you look into the historical context, most of the points you will be able to talk about. Okay? Right. Abhishek, write the first objective. We'll write some objectives here. Right. Anti-colonialism will also be one. So first objective. Go territorial sovereignty and integrity. Territorial sovereignty and integrity. Second, right? Independence. The keywords are enough which you'll be able to expand. Second is independence. Third, right? Peace and disarmament. Peace and disarmament. Peace and disarmament. Next, right? Economic decolonization. Economic decolonization. Next, right? Reform of multilateral institutions. Reform of multilateral institutions. And last, right? Independent foreign policy making. Independent foreign policy making. Independent foreign policy making. Okay. Now, when you look at these objectives, okay, right? This is going to be important in the sense because when you see the relevance of NAM, we will again see are these objectives relevant in the 21st century or not. Okay. If you've not written, एक बार last में एक और point लिखो. देखो global south / third world solidarity. Global south slash third world solidarity, which means they should come together. Why should the third world come together? They face similar challenges. They face similar problems, right? The developing countries are getting exploited, right? They are more vulnerable than developed. So if they come together, their common grievances can be dealt better. These are the objectives of NAM. Okay. Now, after objectives, I need to know contributions of NAM. All of this we are doing in brief because the question which we are expecting is the relevance of NAM. That I'll do in slight more detail. Here I just need to know keywords. For that I'll be able to expand on, right? So objectives I know, and now I want to know what is the contribution. Contribution needs to be more specific. So for example, if the objective has been peace, if the objective has been, for example, anti-colonialism, what exactly have they done in that? Have they been very prominent for any country? Okay. So when I look at the contributions of NAMs, the very first one, please write. Because it supported decolonization efforts. It supported decolonization efforts in, now we'll write some countries, Algeria, comma, Tunisia, Algeria, Tunisia, South Africa, Algeria, Tunisia, South America, and Cuba. The first point we are saying, they talked about decolonization. Second, right, they vehemently criticized apartheid. How many of you recall apartheid from the last class? Yes, apartheid is racial discrimination. They vehemently criticized apartheid in which country? South Africa. They vehemently criticized apartheid in South Africa. Third, right? Third, right, NAM made active calls. They made active call for disarmament, disarmament. Fourth, right? Fourth is an important term. NAM called for NIEO. NAM called for NIEO. What is that? New International Economic Order. NAM called for NIEO, New International Economic Order. Okay, now please understand, if somebody is asking for NIEO, why would they be asking for a new economic order? Because the existing order must have been very exploitative. Okay, so when I say NIEO, few things that they talk about. Okay, there are actually many demands. What you need to know, the most important demand out of all the demands is this: countries should have sovereignty over natural resources. If you think of Africa, what happens? Africa is rich in resources, it gets exploited. Okay, so when I've written NIEO, uske niche first point likho. One of the demands of NIEO is this: sovereignty over natural resources. Second is regulation of MNCs. Regulation of MNCs. Why should MNCs be regulated? Okay. So I'll give you one example here. Okay. How many of you have heard the country DRC? Democratic Republic of Congo. Which continent? Africa. Chalo. Why is it famous? Okay. Now, just look at this article. You know the company Apple, right? Apple faces allegations of using blood minerals from war-torn DRC. DRC is the region in the world which produces 70% of world's cobalt. 70% of world's cobalt कहाँ से आता है? DRC. So when I'm saying blood minerals, it is not that minerals leak out blood. It means it's a war-torn region. There are conflicting tribes and clans who are fighting for these minerals. And for example, MNC like US is extracting them. Okay. Now, this region is also famous for this 3TG, tin, tungsten, tantalum, gold. Okay. So what are we saying? You should regulate the MNCs. Otherwise, the MNCs will exploit your resources. Right? So in the second point that we have written, regulation of MNCs, just write this example. And in this example, I've also covered 2 prelims facts. You just write down the heading, Apple faces allegations of using blood minerals. Right? And remember, DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. Okay? And remember, it has 70%, 70% of world's cobalt. This is also UPSC prelims question. 70% of world's cobalt. Okay, and DRC also has tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold. So even that is a part. Fine. Region faces a lot of violence. And again, extraction by MNCs is going on. So that is also one of the demands. I hope we get it. Coming back. So NIEO says sovereignty honi chahiye. Second, it says regulation of MNCs. Second, it says for concessional lines of credit. Concessional lines of credit. Concessional lines of credit. Okay. So if you understand, see, why is that? Any reason? The developing countries already have a lot of debt. If the LOCs, the line of credit, is not in a favorable term, it will only add to the debt. So they are already under debt distress. To prevent that, they want a concessional lines of credit. That also makes sense. So देखो, why are they saying new international economic order? Because existing economic order is favoring only the developed nations. So this claim is important, that they call for a restructuring of economic order, and this economic order should favor the developing nations more. Okay. Now this term, if you just have a look at, this term was made popular way back in 1974. Okay. And then in case you're wondering, why are we discussing this term right now? in the last few years, okay, you will see many articles on NIEO 2.0. When I do BRICS as a block, I will again tell you about terms like de-dollarization. Okay, and the moment the term de-dollarization comes, what is the meaning of de-dollarization? See, right now the most important currency is what? Dollars, right? De-dollarization simply means what? Alternative currencies should become more important. And de-dollarization again remind experts of NIEO 2.0, right? So just below this, put a star mark. In NIEO 2.0, put a star mark and write. Likho the recent mention of de-dollarization, the recent mention of de-dollarization by BRICS has led to demands of NIEO 2.0. NIEO 2.0. Fine. So there are two things here. What is NIEO? The developing countries said, bhai, we want a new economic order that is favorable for us. And in the recent times, when I do BRICS, I will again tell you terms like de-dollarization. In fact, the moment BRICS countries, and specifically the Brazil president, tweeted about de-dollarization, another famous president tweeted back. And Donald Trump basically said that any idea that you have for de-dollarization, if you are going to implement it, I will put entire sanctions on BRICS nations. USA will never want that dollar becomes less important. So the moment you understand this, you also know even dollars and de-dollarization is also a political issue. Right? So that is one. Okay, this was in news last year. Trump is threatening 100% tariffs on the BRIC blocs if they do de-dollarization. Okay. And there was a big long tweet he had mentioned. So just to tell you that the economics of the world is again divided in developed and developing nations. Fine. So how many contributions have we written of NAM so far? 4. Okay, 4 we've written. Next, write the next one. Next, look at democratization. Democratization, put a dash. Look at NAM calls for democratization of development and multilateral institutions. Democratization of development and multilateral institutions. Now, what is the meaning of democratization of development? Any idea? Just read the term. Achha, what is the meaning of democracy? For the people, by the people, of the people. Somebody is reminded of something you've read in your schools and classes. Then anything else? The easiest or smallest or simplest definition of democracy is only empowerment of people. So when I'm saying development, many times development happens, but development can be lopsided. That only developed countries are benefiting, developing is not is going well. Second issue can be a small section of elites, they are getting all the money and they are getting all the power. okay, but others are not doing as much, okay. So here, if we are talking about two things we get to know, okay. The first thing is democratization of development means the lower section, the lower strata, the developing countries, others should also get fruits of development. If this does not happen, what will happen? Resentment, anger, people will come out to the streets, they will revolt. How many of you are aware of the Oxfam report? सुना है? नहीं सुना है? तो I'll tell you. Oxfam report highlights, and this fact you may have heard, आपने नाम नहीं सुना होगा report का. Oxfam report highlights that the top 1% of the people, they own close to 50% of the resources. Just imagine. Top 1% of the population owns roughly 50% of the resources. Which means the bottom 50% has to do with a very limited small amount of resources. What is this? Inequality. Huge inequality. Fine. So which is why NAM will say democratization of development. This is NAM's call. Fine. And second we have said is democratization of institutions. What is the meaning of it? Dekho, you have institutions. Have you heard of IMF? International Monetary Fund, World Bank, United Nations? All these institutions, be it World Health Organization, World Trade Organization, jitne bhi institutions, these are West dominated. Developing countries are number one underrepresented if they are represented, right? And they don't have much voting powers. So when I'm saying democratization of the institutions should be at least showing numerical strength. If Africa has good amount of population, at least proportionality numbers should be represented. बहुत basic सी demand है. Okay, so this is again something that we read about. That democratization of development and democratization of institutions, both of them are important. Okay, come to the last point. देखो, NAM led to creation of NWICO. NAM led to the creation of NWICO, New World Information and Communication Order. New World Information and Communication Order. अब देखो, what is the meaning of it? Just remember, the entire world was West dominated, we know. The media was also West dominated. So Global South, the country said we should have our own media. At least our issues will get the right limelight, otherwise all the issues of Western nations are also told to us. It is not very beneficial. So what is the idea here? To fix the global imbalance in news and media. Why? Because right now everything is Western media dominated, right? So just after this, write down, it aimed to fix global imbalances. It aimed to fix global imbalances in news and media and support Global South. Fifth में, उसी में. To fix global imbalances in news and media and to support the Global South. All right. So till now, what have you seen? The context, the idea that NAM is a movement also, NAM is a philosophy also, non-alignment. Fine. Then we had seen objectives. We have seen contributions of NAM. Okay. Now, the last heading on NAM is the relevance of NAM. This is a question that is often asked. Okay. देखो, the very first doubt that comes to anybody's mind when I'm saying relevance, okay, is the very first aspect. Fine. The first thing is, of course, we know NAM was set in a specific historical context. The moment the word stopped being bipolar, would NAM still be relevant? First issue. And when I'm saying post Cold War, it means now the word is not bipolar. Second, now we are living in a world of globalization. Earlier, what used to happen? Countries, US group is different, USSR group is different, and then there's a third block that is NAM. Ab kya ho gaya hai? There is globalization. India also adopted LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization, globalization. So now you have to be integrated in the global value chain. If you have to be integrated in the global value chain, will NAM be relevant? Think of this. These two are big challenges. Third, India under Nehru, under Indira Gandhi was very active in NAM. But post Cold War, of course, India's priorities also changed. In fact, if you see in the recent back-to-back three NAM summits, they have been attended either by Indian Vice President. The most recent one, which happened in 2024, was attended by Dr. S. Jaishankar. So Indian Prime Minister is not attending any of the summits. So people also say, has India taken a back seat from NAM? Is NAM becoming leaderless or not? This is also one issue NAM is facing, right? So broadly, if I say, and I will also say, now see, first issue I hope you understand. The word is now no more bipolar. In fact, the word is becoming multipolar. Would NAM be relevant in that? Because its context was totally different. First thing. Second thing I need to know is, in a globalized world, would NAM still hold weight? Yet to be seen. Third, leaderless, and specifically I can say India's leadership also declined. And to that, best thing to quote in the last three NAM summits, none of them have been attended by Indian Prime Minister. Fourth issue is NAM has roughly 120 nations. Okay, after UN, NAM is said to be one of the biggest groupings. 120 members is a huge number. But if you have 120 members, problem kya hogi aapke paas? It is not a small homogeneous group. Different members have different priorities. And bringing everybody to the same table is very difficult. Now, when I say this, it is a heterogeneous group. Ab aap dekho. India will say, let's have third world solidarity. Let's talk about NAM. But at the same time, India has very close relations with the US. India has very good, deep relations with Russia. India aims to also have relations or has relations with China. So the third world can still say, now we are confused. What exactly is non-alignment then? You are having relations with every country and you are expecting us to have solidarity. So whether South-South cooperation truly exists in the 21st century, this is also a challenge. I hope we are able to understand some of these questions. Okay? Yahan tak samajh mein aa raha hai mein? Okay? This actually leads to issue whether NAM is relevant in the 21st century. On top of this, what are the problems world is facing right now? Do we have an arms race going on? Yes. Do we have wars going on? Yes. And wars change the nature of war. Now you have proxy warfare also. You have terrorism. You have climate change. You have unsustainable development. Many issues. And most of these issues are somehow related to NAM's objectives. Right? We see even right now, the developing countries are facing more issues. Right? We see terms like neo-colonialism. That colonialism has now changed its form. It is not as explicit. So precisely because of these reasons, NAM remains relevant. So you have to know how to argue on both sides. First, we will say, yes, it seems that the future of NAM is in danger. It seems that it has slightly lost its relevance. However, because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the current problems the world is facing, NAM remains relevant to our discussion. Are we able to understand this? Okay. So write the heading. This is something because this can be a potential question anytime when you are preparing for this. Write the heading relevance of NAM. देखो NAM's relevance, this we can write it as proper answer. देखो NAM's relevance NAM's relevance has been under question. NAM's relevance has been under question because the original conditions that gave birth to NAM, weakened after the Cold War. Weakened after the Cold War. Full stop, right? With the collapse of Soviet Union, see, I said original conditions that gave birth to NAM weakened after the Cold War. Okay, now right, with the collapse of Soviet Union in 1991, critics argued that, we've already discussed these points, critics argued that non-alignment lost its basic reference point. Non-alignment lost its basic reference point as there were no two clearly defined blocks. There were no two clearly defined blocks to stay away from. Okay? This is the main context. What is the main context? That NAM was rooted in the bipolarity of Cold War. The moment Cold War ended, what happens now? You don't have two proper blocks. In fact, if you recall, I had said NAM's bipolarity, Cold War's bipolarity led to brief unipolarity. Right? US was a big power only for a small amount of time. But US will also face challenges. Fine? This is the main context. Now we will write point wise. Okay, now write point number 1. So context you know. Context kya hai hamara? The moment Soviet disintegrates, now we don't have two separate poles. This is the main thing. Now write number 1. पहले को rise of US led unipolarity. Rise of US led unipolarity. Put a dash and write many NAM countries, including India, had to engage with US had to engage with US for trade, technology, aid, AID, making strict non-alignment, less practical. Strict non-alignment, less practical. So which means you are engaging with the US. Why? Because you have to do trade. US has become a big power, which also means you will have to ask a question on whether this is relevant or not. 2 points till now. Pehla point kya hai? Historical context. Disintegration of Soviet. Second point, US. Now again one thing, your notes in some sense will be descriptive in some portions. Where it is descriptive, the reason is there is a higher chance of that theme getting asked. In some points, I will only give you bullet points. That is for your reference. Now, when you are revising your notes, it is always a good practice to know the heading. For example, in this case, I should know in my mind, acha, I need to know this particular concept. You can expand on it if you know the vocabulary of it. So don't think you have to cram every line that is mentioned, every keyword that is mentioned. Keywords are important. But in this, what should be? Till now, I will summarize everything that I've said in maybe half a page that you've written. I only know 2 points. One, disintegration of Soviet means no two clearly defined blocks. First thing. Second thing, rise of US. Now third, जो मैंने ये लिखा है, अब मैं third लिखूंगा globalization. Write the third point. Third, right, economic liberalization and globalization. Economic liberalization and globalization. So, right, developing countries increasingly integrated with a global capitalist economy. And competed for Western investment. Increasingly integrated with global capitalist economy and competed for Western investment. Now, if this happens, the demand for NIEO will fall flat. Yes or no? Right? Next point. Next, देखो, internal divisions within NAM. Next point is internal divisions within NAM. देखो, NAM members differed on human rights, comma, democracy, comma, climate, and contentious issues like Palestine. Contentious issues like Palestine. Full stop. Because this made collective action difficult. This made collective action difficult. So what it means, on human rights, they have differing perspectives. On climate change, differing perspectives. On Palestine, some may be pro-Palestine, some may be pro-Israel. So the countries themselves are divided. And this happens to any bloc which has many members. If you have 5 members, cooperation is easy. 10 members, tough. 50 members, tougher. 100 members, even more tough. you will not be able to have a congruence, convergence on issues. You will have, every country will have their own priorities, right? Next, so how many points have we written? 3. Okay, next, right? Next, देखो, changing priorities of India. And by the way, I'll tell you just when I'm done with this, UPSC in GS2 has asked you a tougher question on NAM, and that too it was critical of India. Okay, so after I'm done with this point, I'll tell you that question also that came in mains. They go changing priorities of India. Now, when I'm saying changing priorities of India, what do you think? What changed in India? Very good. India adopted LPG reforms. So what do I say? India moved away from Nehruvian idealism to neoliberalism. And the moment you became neoliberal, your outlook changed. We had to look, diversify. Soviet, the long partner that we had, is facing a crisis. So India is now looking outwards and diversifying. Second thing I also told you that India's own leadership in NAM declined in this time. Right? In fact, in the last 10 years, like I told you, last 10 years, none of the NAM summits was attended by the Indian PM, which also shows you that it is not having that higher level of relevance. Fine? So here you write, India moved from India moved from Nehruvian non-alignment to neoliberalism and multi-alignment. Neoliberalism and multi-alignment. Okay, and write last point, देखो, rise of, last point which made NAM less relevant, rise of alternate forums like BRICS, rise of alternate forums like BRICS, BRICS, SCO, ASEAN led forums, BRICS, SCO, ASEAN led forums, and issue based coalitions. Issue-based coalitions. This reduced the dependence on NAM. This reduced the dependence on NAM. ठीक है? Now write the heading 18th NAM Summit. Sorry, don't write 18th, write 19th. 19th NAM Summit is the most recent one. 19th NAM Summit लिखेंगे and write Kampala, Uganda, 2024. This is the most recent one that has happened. 19th NAM Summit, Kampala, Uganda. Now, the question what I asked you, is NAM relevant for 21st century? Here, the speech that was given by Dr. Jaishankar, I'll be quoting you some instances from this speech only. Okay? In fact, first I'll tell you, इनकी speech end कैसे हो रही थी? Just see the last lines. Okay? NAM has entered its 7th decade. The world has transformed, our capabilities have changed. We are bolder in our demands. Share, collaborate, reinforce. The voice of NAM is here to be heard. The voice of the NAM is here to stay, right? And to grow. So if we are saying whether the relevance of NAM, is it there, is it not there? The counter to that will be this, right? That in the 19th NAM Summit 2024, this is also how you integrate your current affairs. And you say that it is still relevant as seen in the speech of Dr. Jaishankar. तो अब इस क्वेश्चन को मैं एंड इस स्पीच से करूंगा अभी, ठीक है? बट नाउ आई टेल यू what his speech main crux will be. He will say that the problems that we face right now are also aligned to the objectives of NAM. NAM remains the biggest grouping that is for South-South cooperation. BRICS भाई छोटा है, BRICS में कितने हैं? Even if you say BRICS plus, it has very limited members, right? SCO, very limited members. This is a big block. Why lose the block for which we have spent 7 decades, almost 70 years, right? If you recall, last class में we had written Belgrade. Start हुआ Belgrade में सब कुछ, the first summit. So here, first of all, it's a big grouping. Second, right now the global South is still facing challenges, right? Global South क्या face करता है? Terrorism, okay, climate change, disasters, unsustainable development, exploitation. All these are issues relevant even right now. So global South needs to come together to fight its challenges together. There is no point of abandoning NAM. That is the whole idea, right? And that is what he will try. In fact, they will also talk about, if I just quickly go through this, it's a very short speech. You can also see it later on. Okay. Now, just look at. First point they mention is this. COVID pandemic. And said, COVID pandemic, it will take some generations to heal. Pehla issue hai COVID. Second, highlights conflicts, especially conflict in Gaza. Okay. Climate change is also mentioned in his speech. Climate change is a challenge. Okay. This is a very good point. The triad, 3 things of debt, inflation, and growth is also challenging the developing countries. ठीक है, ये भी challenge है. Other than this, right? And this is a good point, he says. We have overthrown colonialism, but new forms of inequity and dominations are coming in, especially under globalization. So globalization में what happens? It's a domination of West, which again tells you NAM becomes important. Okay, and here ultimately he says that NAM should respond. You want a multipolar world, reformed UN. Again, for reform UN, NAM has been saying reform UN. Again, the same point should be clear in our mind. Okay, so you have to have steps. Okay, regional groups, etc. Right? So you've written 18th NAM summit. Sorry, 19th. Okay. इस पे लिखो पहले को. The theme of this summit. The theme of this summit was, inverted commas, right? Deepening cooperation. Deepening cooperation for shared global affluence. Deepening cooperation for shared global affluence. Affluence means prosperity. Affluence, we write it like this. Affluence. Okay, now right. देखो, the 19th NAM summit. The 19th NAM summit showed that NAM is no longer 19th NAM summit showed that NAM is no longer about staying away from Cold War blocs alone. NAM is no longer about staying away from Cold War blocs, BLOCS blocs alone. NAM is no longer about staying away from Cold War blocs alone. Full stop, right? It is now a platform for Global South. It is now a platform for Global South to demand equity, in global governance, to demand equity in global governance, comma, development, comma, finance, technology, and security. Okay? Now, couple of things that you should know. Ab we'll write लिखो challenges faced by the world. This is a mini heading. We'll directly take some points from the speech. And we'll say because of these challenges, NAM remains relevant. Okay? So challenges faced by the world. Number one, right? COVID pandemic. And COVID pandemic, it's not that it has happened so everybody's fine. The impact of COVID pandemic, like he says, it will take generations to heal. So first is COVID pandemic. Second, right? Conflicts, global conflicts, put a dash. Right? Gaza, comma, Russia, Ukraine. Third, right, issue climate change. And he says it is becoming more disruptive. So three things till now. COVID-19, the conflicts in the world, it can be Russia, Ukraine, it can be Gaza issue, right? Third is climate change. Fourth, right? And fourth, you can remember it in this manner. Fourth, kya hai? The triad. Triad means three things. The triad of debt, TRIAD, triad of debt, inflation, and growth challenges. The triad of debt, inflation, and growth challenges disproportionately impact developing countries. Disproportionately impact developing countries. Right? Next, right? Next point. New forms of inequity and domination. New forms of inequity and domination are seen in the era of globalization. New forms of inequity and domination are seen in the era of globalization. Okay? So what have we seen? First issue was COVID, which is a health problem. Second one is the global conflicts. Third one is climate change. Fourth one is the triad, right? And the fifth one is, at least these are very explicitly mentioned in the speech. But even beyond this, there are issues like issue of technology transfer, right? Issue of terrorism. The issue, I'll make you write down some more issues. Abhi ruk jao. Okay? 5 issues you've written. Now write this next one. In the 21st century, of US-China rivalry, comma, Russia-West tensions, US-China rivalry, comma, Russia-West tensions, and fragmented globalization. Fragmented globalization. Put a dash. लिखो preserving strategic autonomy. Preserving strategic autonomy becomes important. Okay. Next point देखो. What are we saying is the word is very fractured right now. In this fractured word, preserving your strategic autonomy becomes important, and for that NAM again is important. Maybe the relevance of the movement has declined, the idea has not declined. Fine. Next, right? Because north south divide has not disappeared. This is still there. North south divide has not disappeared, as seen in debt distress, comma, food security, climate finance, comma, unequal trade rules, comma, vaccine inequity, and technology access. Right? Next point. You go Kampala. Kampala is where this happened. You go Kampala reaffirmed NAM's relevance. Kampala reaffirmed NAM's relevance as a collective voice of developing countries. As a collective voice of developing countries. Full stop. देखो NAM remains a platform for South cooperation. NAM remains a platform for South cooperation. Full stop. यहाँ पे देखो India's vaccine diplomacy. Comma, ITEC. Full form is this: Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation. This is India's biggest developmental program. ITEC. India's Technical and Economic Cooperation. For example, when I say ITEC, ITEC has trained more than 2 lakh personnel. Okay, be it Africa, in other areas. This is one of the most successful program of Government of India for development partnership and development cooperation. Okay, so we are writing India's vaccine diplomacy, ITEC, comma, DPI, digital public infrastructure. DPI is digital public infrastructure, and capacity building in Africa capacity building in Africa shows the continuing relevance of South-South cooperation. Shows the continuing relevance of South-South cooperation. Okay. Now, just end में लिखो. In the words of Dr. S. Jaishankar, in the words of Dr. S. Jaishankar, देखो, the NAM has entered its 7th decade. NAM has entered its 7th decade. The voice of the NAM is here to be heard. Voice of NAM is here to be heard. The voice of the NAM is here to stay and to grow. The voice of NAM is here to stay and to grow. Okay? In fact, what he said all of this in the 19th NAM summit in Kampala. Kampala is in Uganda in 2024. Okay? Now, what you can also do is write this article as your homework. Whenever you have to revise NAM, just read this article once. If you want, you can just quickly summarize it. The entire NAM gets concluded. Right? We have seen why NAM was under crisis, why people said NAM is not as relevant, but why is NAM relevant even right now? The problems the world is facing right now, the solution to that, you can still find through NAM. Okay, so just to end this slide, write the last line. So NAM remains relevant. NAM remains relevant, but in a transformed form. NAM remains relevant, but in a transformed form. The Kampala Summit 2024. The Kampala Summit 2024 shows that NAM has moved from Cold War non-alignment to 21st century strategic autonomy. 21st century strategic autonomy. And global South bargaining. 21st century strategic autonomy and global South bargaining. Okay. So this part we've already done in detail. And this will also tell you this, if there's any group, for example, if the question is UN's relevance, we will see a similar framework. That UN exists, right? And the idea of UN existence is it is based for cooperation. Even though wars are there, but UN still has a role to play, right? In the same manner, NAM, even though under decline, has a role to play. Fine. Next is, you see terms like Pax Britannica, Pax Americana, and Pax Sinica. What is the meaning of this? When I say Pax Britannica, it simply means the Britain dominance. Okay, so Britain was dominant for a very long time. That thing was known as Pax Britannica. Okay, so Pax Britannica, etc., or let's say Pax Americana. Pax Americana means the dominance of US overall in world affairs. And the recent term in news is Pax Sinica. This is China. These three terms actually tell you how the world order is changing. Okay, every country wants its own dominance, right? Shashi Tharoor sometime back wrote a book, Pax Indica. Pax Indica क्यों लिखा होगा? To make a claim that India is also an important rising power, right? So write a small heading and just we'll write one line definition for each term. लिखो, the global world order. The heading now is the global world order. This NAM wala part we have done. Second heading come to global world order. Here we'll see some terms. The global world order. First term, right? Pax Britannica. In this you write, it refers to the 19th century British-led world order. Refers to 19th century British-led world order sustained by naval supremacy, comma, colonial empire, right? This period saw colonization of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Latin America. So first term is Pax Britannica. Come to the second one, right? Pax Americana. In this year, last year, all these terms are in news. So you should know some important terms. Second, right? Pax Americana. Now, right? It refers to post 1945. It refers to post 1945. US-led liberal international order. Post 1945. US-led international order built around the UN, comma, NATO, comma, Bretton Woods institutions. In the bracket, write IMF, comma, World Bank, comma, open markets and US military power. In the global order, the most important one for us is Pax Americana. Please read this statement again, the whole line. We are saying that post 1945, when the World War ended, it is a US-led liberal international order. US is leading it. How is US leading it? Through its military power, through support to UN, NATO, Bretton Woods institutions. ठीक? The biggest irony right now is that this liberal order, which USA championed, is under stress. Who's causing the stress? US itself. Of course, it was China before. It was Russia. But the current stress is because of US itself. US is fracturing the very word order it created. Right? So this is a big challenge. Right? So this point we have written. Likho. Iske niche likho. Likho, this order is getting challenged by. This order is getting challenged by China's rise. Which trap had we seen before China's rise? कौन बताएगा? और कोई पीछे? Anybody? स्टार्ट किससे होता है? चलो ये बताओ. T से. चलो सही. Answer is correct. I know the term is slightly difficult to pronounce for some of you. Anybody else? Thucydides trap. ठीक है. Even if you say था thu, the THU, I'll say it. You're saying T. At least you are making a progress. Fine. So China's rise in the bracket, right? China's rise, Thucydides trap, comma, financial crisis, comma, protectionism, financial crisis, protectionism, comma, Afghanistan and Iran. Afghanistan and Iran. ठीक है. So Pax Americana is seemingly contested. Come to third one. This is important term. Pax Sinica, Sinica. Pax Sinica. It refers to global order based on. It refers to global order based on Chinese economic power. Chinese economic power, comma, military power. It refers to global order based on Chinese economic power, comma, military power, comma, BRI, that is Belt and Road Initiative, comma, trade dependence, and technology networks. Technology networks. Some experts argue that Pax Sinica may create debt dependence. China is criticized for debt trap diplomacy. It may create debt dependence and coercive diplomacy. Coercive means use of force. Debt dependence and coercive diplomacy which goes against a liberal rules based order. Which goes against liberal rules based order. How many of you got time to read about China's 9-dash line? Bataoge? Chalo, you raised your hands. Anything that you remember from 9-dash line? How China say? Good. Is theirs? Okay. Anything you want to add to this? There's some islands. Okay, good. Correct. Can you tell? Do you remember any names? No, it cannot claim an entire country. Okay. Spratly Islands, very good. Any other? Scarborough Shoal, very good. Or kuch? But which islands in South China Sea? I'll do this, but I'm just asking you in case somebody has done their homework. Hmm? Start with P. Which island? Other people, do you know that there is something known as homework? चलो ठीक है ठीक है. I'll tell you there is Spratly Islands, there is Scarborough Shoal. Okay, there are other islands, and many islands are disputed. Fine. This is it. China's claim. China lost the verdict in the international court. Permanent Court of Arbitration ruled against China, and China said this ruling is incorrect. Okay, we still make our claim. Okay, so we will see all of that later. We've seen 3 terms. 4th, right? Now this term is in news, in your current affairs. How many of you have heard this term, Pax Silica? Right, Pax Silica now? This is a very recent term. In fact, if you look at some of these articles, this is the article 2026. India joins Pax Silica at the AI Impact Summit. The summit which got famous for wrong reasons, right? Now, right? So look at Pax Silica, SILICA. This you should be aware of, Pax Silica. An emerging order, Pax Silica, it's an emerging order shaped by control over semiconductors, comma, AI, data, semiconductors, AI, data, comma, digital infrastructure and critical technologies. That is the meaning of Pax Silica, overall idea. In fact, some scholars say Pax Technologia or Pax Silica are same thing. But there is something known as a Pax Silica initiative. ये एक specific initiative है. Okay, this initiative is of US. It's a US-led initiative. क्यों होगा? To reduce reliance on China. So I know the idea of what is Pax Silica. It is a word order which is based on the control of important essential technologies. Which technologies? Like semiconductors, AI, critical technologies, etc. इसी के नीचे, right? Pax Silica initiative. Pax Silica initiative. This again tells you the war in the current world is what? Technological war. Right? Pax Silica initiative, right? It's a US-led economic security coalition. It's a very recent coalition. US-led economic security coalition. If you want to know December 2025, that's okay, but you can ignore that also. For securing global supply chains. To secure global supply chains for AI, semiconductors and critical minerals. AI, semiconductors and critical minerals. And main thing, just remember, if it is a US-led, हम नीचे लिखेंगे reduce reliance on China. Out of the 4 questions that you will get in mains, at least 1 question will be on the word order. Something of that sort. It will either be US or China or a mix of both. The US-led economic security coalition. Why? Secure global supply chains for AI, semiconductors and critical minerals. क्यों है? Reduce reliance on China. As simple as that. Reduce reliance on China. Is that clear? Fine. And last thing, put a star mark and write current affairs. India has joined Pax Silica. Just remember this. That's it. In prelims, etc., you'll read more about it. Current affairs classes more. But you should be aware what is going on in the world. These are all updates of 2026. Now, nobody is going to ask you when has India joined, whether in which summit. But main remember, India also joins this initiative, Pax Silica. Which country has almost 90% dominance in semiconductor chips? Taiwan. Okay. Taiwan is a part of which country? It is disputed. Huh? China claims Taiwan to be its part, but sometimes US has direct relations with Taiwan, bypassing China. What is this? Pax Silica. Which means ultimately what is the idea? US wants to have dominance over semiconductors. Okay. Sometime back, USA there was a CHIPS Act. This is not for Uncle Chips or Lays. What is this CHIPS Act? Semiconductors, right? To boost, and this is a very important act, USA CHIPS Act. Are you able to understand? Okay. Now, we have written Pax. What is the Pax? Silica. इसके नीचे में heading लिखो. That is why I started with NAM. Now write down a topic, लिखो new This is all under the word order. Right now there is a debate. Are we in a new Cold War 2.0? Now you already know Cold War. Now you've understood technology, Pax Silica. Now this topic will make more sense to you. What is the new Cold War exactly? Okay, ab dekho. If I say new Cold War 2.0, what do you think it is between which countries? USA and China. Fine. Ab dekho. First see, why is it new? Old Cold War was what? It was rooted in ideological rivalry. US, USSR. Why is this new? First of all, countries are different. Second, the issues on which they are fighting are also different. Earlier Cold War was a fight between liberalism versus communism or socialism. Right now the fight is between, the ideology is same, but the fight is Pax Americana versus Pax Sinica over Pax Silica. Right? When I'm saying Cold War 2.0, please remember, China, you'll be surprised to know which country is the leader in quantum technologies. China. Leaps and bounds. China has something known as artificial sun. That is known as tokamak. It's a very advanced nuclear fusion program. China has invested heavily on nuclear warheads. Its military power and its economic power is rising. We already have seen terms like Thucydides trap, etc. So some experts argue that right now the new arena for conflict is technology. Who has the access to semiconductors, AI? How many of you know DeepSeek? DeepSeek? What is DeepSeek? So in just 10 minutes from now, you will have a very good overall understanding of some of the technological issues. DeepSeek is Chinese AI model. Now, you know ChatGPT? Which company is there? OpenAI. Name is OpenAI, but you'll say, sir, they still charge for their premium versions and operations, whereas DeepSeek does not. Okay? And how ironic is it? Right? The company which claims to be OpenAI and a Chinese company, right? Chinese are known for their lack of transparency. They are saying it is totally open source. Fine? So this is just one small dimension where the conflict is happening. There are various arenas where the new Cold War 2.0 seeks to happen. Okay? So you've written the heading New Cold War 2.0. Okay, so isko likho, write it. Likho, New CW 2.0 refers to the emerging strategic rivalry It refers to emerging strategic rivalry between US-led West, US-led West and China-led I'm writing a term, you can write it. China-led revisionist powers. Who are revisionist powers? Sir, they do very good revision after the class. What is revision? Revisionist powers are actually the powers which change the status quo. US says, I want a liberal international order. Revisionist power says, hatao isko. I will revise it. It's not the revision that you should do after a class. Ye revision alag hai. What is this revision? It will overthrow the existing order. So China wants its own set of order. So these are revisionist powers. Okay? So what are we seeing? US led West, China led revisionist powers. Okay? Full stop. Likho. Unlike Cold War 1.0, unlike, this line is the most important line which summarizes the entire conflict. Unlike Cold War 1.0, the present rivalry is not based on ideology. Present rivalry is not based on ideology, full stop. It is marked by economic interdependence. It is marked by economic interdependence, comma, technology wars, comma, supply chain rivalry, comma, military competition, and institutional contestation. Institutional contestation, which means which institution is important. They're even fighting in that. Institutional contestation. Institutional contestation. Okay, there's a fight in the institutions. Now please note how many types of challenges are happening. It is not an ideology war, it is a, please read, technology and supply chain, and there are multiple conflicts which are there, right? Now I will be giving examples just to prove the points that we have seen. Okay, in examples may please make sure, see, I'll be talking about NVIDIA. You have heard about NVIDIA? What is NVIDIA? No, true, but what is NVIDIA? Okay, so here I'll tell you about CHIPS Act, about NVIDIA, about Taiwan, all the major events that are there in a very brief discussion. Even emerging questions on technology and geopolitics, if they come, you will be very equipped to answer that. Fine. So we are looking at this challenge. So here you please write. Dekho, the chips and science, now change the paragraph. Now I will give you examples. So dekho, the Chips and Science Act 2022. This is the Chips and Science Act USA ka 2022. And just see what it is. Boosts domestic semiconductor, but main cheez kya hai? Counter China's tech dominance. right? इस चीज को, if you see the name of the act, this is known as a term techno-nationalism, technology and nationalism. And this is a very good example of that. So there's a CHIPS Act, you are boosting your semiconductors, but at the same time, you have an ambition or a strategic objective to reduce Chinese reliance. Right? So we've written the CHIPS Act 2022, comma, US export control, US export control on advanced chips, comma, the struggle over AI. So we've written US export control on advanced chips, comma, the struggle over AI, comma, 5G, comma, quantum technology, 5G, quantum technology, and critical minerals highlight, and critical minerals highlight that technology has become the new battlefield. Technology has become the new battlefield of power politics. Technology has become the new battlefield of power politics. Okay? Now, in case you have not written, in the US Chips and Science Act, I've just mentioned the term. Now, in one line, you will summarize. Don't remember the money. Main cheese you will write: boost domestic semiconductor manufacturing, reduce reliance on foreign supply, and तीसरा, counter China's tech dominance. If you have done the first essay, the first class of IR, I've already told you, even UPSC has asked you a topic in essay, technology as a factor in geopolitics. So if you are aware about these terms, again, of course, it helps you not only in your IR answers, it also helps you in essay. It also helps you in interview. So there are three main objectives: boost domestic semiconductor manufacturing, okay, reduce reliance on foreign supply chains, and third is reduce China's tech dominance. And second, I would want you should keep this as a habit when you're doing foundation classes. If there's any term, हो सकता है for some of you, you even are not aware what is colonialism. आपने term देखा. If you're not clear, go to the Google, search it out, take a sticky note, or wherever you have space, just add it there. Everybody has a different, let's say, understanding spectrum, right? If you feel there is any lacuna or any challenge that you face, वो वहीं पे करो. ठीक है? So this part we have seen. Next slide. Next paragraph. Now one small paragraph on Taiwan we'll write. So Taiwan is central to new Cold War 2.0. Taiwan is central to new Cold War 2.0 because of TSMC. Because of TSMC. This is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Because of TSMC. TSMC is the world's largest contract chip maker. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, is the world's largest contract chip maker. अब सोचो, control over Taiwan becomes so important. If the future of the world, and see, these chips, will be used in phones, smartphones, tablets, computing devices everywhere. That is why the control of semiconductors is very important, which is why USA is boosting its domestic production. US wants to change the over reliance on China, right? So TSMC likha hoga aapne, full form, and right, it's the world's largest contract chip maker. In bracket, if you write down 70% share, etc., that is okay. There are many reasons to it. For example, India mein you'll see fabrication plants. So for that, if there is any industry, देखो basic geography सोचेंगे. Geography, to set up any industry, you need to have 4 major things. What are these? Land, capital, labor, entrepreneurship. Fine. So in this, when you read more about, for example, in economy, you will see India has a good agricultural base, but we directly shifted from agriculture to services. We did not focus much on the industrial part of it. इसमें भी अब आप सोचो, right now, how many of you are aware that the prices of all these devices, laptops, have increased by 30-40% in the recent times? Hard drives, etc., have become very, very expensive. The chips. So those who control the supply chain, the dominance that is there with TSMC for a very long time. Earlier, the world was not going too much into this part. In fact, there are some people who are saying, let's move beyond these chips. Right? Even abhi aap agle kuch saalon mein you'll find that even the DNA that is there, for example, okay, or some part of biotech and biology can also be used for storage of data. It will take lesser space and it is even better method, because after some time, this rivalry will become even more intense. Right now, USA is trying to control how much some person will have the access to chips. जिसके पास ज़्यादा chip access. What is chips going to do? Faster computing, right? अगर faster computing होगी, so more data can be processed. And right now we say data is the new oil. In fact, it is now said chips are the new oil, right? And when I say chips, of course, I mean microchips. So this is a challenge. So of course, Taiwan has its a lot of advantages over a period of time. अपने आप अगर आप देखोगे fabrication या plants that we have very limited, and it will take a lot of time for us to catch up. And what is why? That is why we say India needs a sovereign AI. उसके लिए भी आपको चाहिए domestic manufacturing and capacity. Fine. In fact, this question जो आप कह रहे हो, this question also can come a question as a GS1 question. GS1 में there's a topic of location of industries. Why an industry is concentrated in one region can be a possible GS1 question also, right? So that is there. In case somebody is interested, these are good topics to read about. Okay, so agar likhna hai, to you can write this also as a homework. Write this as a homework, right? Read about that why Taiwan holds a monopoly in semiconductor manufacturing, which not only helps you in IR, it also helps you in geography. Okay, now in the Taiwan point, please continue to write. Full stop करके लिखो. This has created a. This has created a. With Taiwan, we use a term in geopolitics, silicon shield. Taiwan का जो point लिखा था आपने, TSMC, full stop. Now right. This has created a inverted comma silicon shield. This has created a silicon shield, making Taiwan both geopolitically indispensable, making Taiwan both geopolitically indispensable and highly vulnerable. Highly vulnerable. So China has so much of, Taiwan has dominance. So nobody's going to directly attack because there's a huge interdependence. This is known as a silicon shield. It is very important also, and you cannot weaponize it as much. Okay. Right, more than 90% of advanced chips are ultimately from Taiwan. So that is again an issue. Now, right. They go despite next para. despite chip restrictions, Chinese firms are trying to develop efficient AI models, in the bracket right, DeepSeek. Despite chip restrictions, the Chinese firms are trying to develop efficient AI models, bracket right, DeepSeek, and reduce the dependence on Western technology. Reduce the dependence on Western technology. Okay. Now, new Cold War 2.0 mein major dimension is the dimension of technology and how US and China are contesting. But change the paragraph now. Last dimension also add karo. The US or the new Cold War is not restricted only to US and China. So likho, the Russia-Ukraine war has added another dimension. The Russia-Ukraine war has added another dimension through sanctions, NATO's expansion, energy geopolitics. Energy geopolitics is again in news because of Strait of Hormuz. Energy geopolitics and financial inclusion. Now, I'll tell you two terms now, and after that we'll write. Normally we use this term, complex interdependence. The word shows complex interdependence. What is that? Ideally, you will see US and China, they have so much of issues, they will go to a war. But do they go to a war? No. They do huge amounts of trade. Okay? Which tells you the global value chains, the global supply chains and the value chains are in a manner. The countries which ideally want to go to a war are forced to do trade. And trade prevents war. Aap socho, so many talks were there. US, China, back to back, tariffs. But Trump actually went to meet Xi Jinping in May. There was a US-China summit that happened. So complex interdependence tells you that in the world where the countries may fight, they still have cooperation. Okay, cooperation despite conflict. And conflicts can be economic, it can be anywhere. In the recent times, in the times of globalization, I see one more term. Weaponized interdependence. Okay. Now, first I'll tell you a few terms. You know water, right? Sunego bahut famous quote, water, water everywhere, no drop to drink. Okay, that tells you the irony of water. For example, when water is flowing in the Indus Water Treaty, has India put the treaty in abeyance? What does that mean? Can water be weaponized? It can be weaponized. Can trade be weaponized? सबसे obvious example है. So when I'm saying weaponized interdependence, the best example for that is tariffs. आप tariffs लगाओ, right? Sanctions, right? Weaponized interdependence can be on any resource that you can think of. Water, weaponization of water, weaponization of satellites, space. So in the current world order, sometimes countries go for this step also, weaponized, because see, look at China. For China, there is a term that is said. When China sneezes, the word catches cold. What is the meaning of it? Control se bhi zyada, China is deeply interconnected. So when China sneezes, the world catches cold, right? And this quote we also saw in COVID-19. In COVID-19, the moment Chinese manufacturing was hit, everybody was hit. Countries were relying too much on China, which tells you something also known as weaponized interdependence. If you over rely on one single player, what if that player has a crisis? But what if that player actually stops the flow? How many of you know the term Asian Air Oil Premium? जो OPEC countries हैं, the oil producing countries, when they see the oil की value या price कम होती जा रही है, ultimately price is all about demand and supply. वो क्या करेंगे? Supply कम कर देंगे. They will reduce the supply, automatically the demand will increase, the price will increase. So when I'm looking at weaponized interdependence, this is also a term that is used in the current context. So to write this, you write. हमने भी क्या लिखा है? NATO expansion, energy, geopolitics and financial inclusion. Okay, full stop. इसको लिखो. This shows the rise of weaponized interdependence. This shows the rise of weaponized interdependence, where trade, finance, energy, trade, finance, energy and technology, are used as tools of coercion. Tools of coercion. Coercion means by force. Tools of coercion. Coercion is written on the board also. Coercion. Okay? Tools of coercion. देखो, just to end this, लिखो 10 New Cold War 2.0. Thus, New Cold War 2.0 is a techno-geopolitical contest. It is a techno-geopolitical contest over power, technology, and the rules of emerging world order. Power, technology, and the rules of emerging world order. Full stop. देखो, for India, the best response is strategic autonomy. For India, the best response is strategic autonomy, supply chain resilience, So strategic autonomy, supply chain resilience, and trusted technology partnerships. Trusted technology partnerships. Okay? Now, in this section, the section was emerging that word order. We've seen Pax Silica, Pax. Right, 4 things we have seen: Pax Britannica, Americana, Sinica, Silica. Talking of Silica, we transitioned into the Pax Silica initiative, India joining that initiative, and from that we transitioned to New Cold War 2.0. Now, New Cold War 2.0 now will make sense to you, because already you've seen what is Cold War, already you've seen what is NAM, you've seen the recent NAM summit. What was the recent NAM summit? कहाँ पे हुई? Uganda, 2024. This is the 19th NAM summit, fine. And we also understood what is the relevance of NAM in the 21st century. Is it relevant? Is it not relevant? The best answer to that is Dr. S. Jaishankar's speech. ठीक है. By the way, that speech will also be your homework. बहुत छोटी सी speech है, पढ़िएगा आप उसको. ठीक है. Now, in the emerging word order, one more question is there. This question has been asked in 2025 also. So you should be clear on what happens to globalization from an IR perspective. Globalization is also a topic you do in GS1 in Indian society. I am doing globalization from the IR perspective. Fine. So now, under the emerging word order, you can also write, or you can write the heading globalization in 21st century. This is a continuity of what we are discussing. Okay. Now, what do we need to know? I first need to know what is globalization. Okay. So here, right, definition, I'll just do it. This is a very short topic. Main thing we have to see is the challenges of globalization. Pehले likho, according to Anthony Giddens, Giddens. People with PSR or sociology optional will read more about Anthony Giddens, but even for people with GS not having an optional background, right? Anthony Giddens defines globalization as a compression of time and space. As a compression of time and space. Compression of time and space. Second, right? Globalization is defined, second definition, globalization is defined as the free movement of capital, ideas and people, free movement of capital, ideas and people with growing interconnectedness and interdependence. Capital, the movement, ideas and people with growing interconnectedness and interdependence. In the bracket, right, word becoming a global village. तो दो टर्म्स यूज होते हैं. वी से आइदर वी आर लिविंग इन अ ग्लोबल विलेज और वी से लिविंग इन अ बॉर्डरलेस वर्ल्ड. All of that is globalization, right? Now, can anybody tell me what are the four elements of state? Sovereignty, population, government. चौथी चीज क्या है? टेरिटरी. ठीक. Is there a conflict between these two? सोच के बताओ. State has four elements, and I have just told you globalization. Globalization says we are living in a borderless world. It's a global village. There is a interdependence and interconnectedness. Right? There's a compression of time and space. I want to ask from you, is there a conflict between state and globalization, or there's no conflict? What is the conflict? Okay. अब देखो, globalization says we are living in a borderless world. Border is what? Territory. So if I just go into the definition, what does state say? State में सबसे important चीज क्या है? Territory. State says territory. Globalization says deterritorialization. Are these concepts coming in conflict? So there is an inherent conflict in the definition, which is why many people ask, the question is there, whether globalization impacts state sovereignty. Some people say yes, some people say no. That is how the analysis is done. Okay. So I hope you understand what is globalization. Second dimension, you write, you go state versus globalization. State versus globalization. Now you write, देखो, one of the essential elements of state, one of the essential elements of state is its territory and borders. One of the essential elements of state is its territory and borders. Whereas globalization's idea of a borderless world, whereas globalization's idea of a borderless world comes in conflict. Globalization's idea of a borderless world comes in conflict with state's definition. It comes in conflict with state's definition. Okay. Now, so state focuses on territory. What does it say? And this is precisely very difficult to govern and argue. Kaise? For example, you know EU? EU may, the EU member, let's say countries, there is something known as the Schengen Agreement. The people within the EU can travel without visa very easily. Okay, that is there. But what will be the problem? It may lead to some security conflict, some security issues. Same cheese here. If I say globalization, the problem will be migration. Kaise control karoge? Let's say there's a refugee crisis. Right? You cannot open the borders for everybody. That will be a challenge. So globalization versus state, you will see conflicts even in the current times. If there's a conflict in Gaza, many people will flee to Europe. Okay, if there's a conflict, for example, in Bangladesh, after the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, some people will try to come. Now, India cannot keep the borders open all the time. Of course, we supported a lot of refugees in the 1971 war. अब देखो कैसे हम concepts को link कर रहे हैं. So, the idea of globalization, I am saying, may come in conflict with the idea of state. One of the best example for this that we saw is problem without passports. Why COVID-19 became such a big problem? Also, the issue is globalization. Let's say somebody was carrying the virus from Japan. They come to some other country. आपने सुना the term super spreader? Why there is super spreader? Why? Because of globalization. कितना check करोगे? कितना control? And we say these issues as problems without passports. Of course, very small virus you cannot see directly. So controlling it is very difficult also because of globalization. So globalization actually helps you in trade, no doubt about it. But it can also create big problems. Why? Everybody is interconnected. इसीलिए हम बोलते हैं, I started in my first class, poverty anywhere is a threat to human security everywhere. Why is that? Now the terror networks are global in nature. So somebody living in Middle East, or let's say D company operating from Dubai, for example, can carry out a terrorist attack even in Brussels, even in, let's say, maybe some other part of the world. So that is also true. So terror networks can also now operate without borders. So this will work both ways. So when I'm saying globalization in 21st century, there is a lot of positive to it, no doubt. MNCs can work, hiring can happen, people can move from, let's say, Europe में किसी की posting आई. Some of you, if from the IT background or if you have friends, आपने सुना होगा, many people actually want of posting outside, right? On site, for example, somebody will go. So there is a positive also, but there is a negative also. We have both of things I need to know, right? Now, this I'll be just expanding on in a minute. Okay, now you write down अब लिखो earlier globalization. So I'll start with the traditional sense, and now I'll tell you what is the challenge in the 21st century. देखो earlier globalization was based on the liberal belief it was based on the liberal belief that free trade comma WTO rules global supply chains and open markets will create prosperity and peace. So globalization was based on the liberal belief free trade, WTO rules, global supply chain and open markets will create prosperity and peace. Full stop. लिखो states reduced barriers, companies searched for efficiency. All of this is what happened traditionally. States reduced barriers, companies searched for efficiency, and production was spread across borders. Production was spread across borders. When I'm saying production spread across borders, again think of, for example, you think of Apple. Apple has a plant in India. You think of very big clothing brand Zara, for example, has a huge plant in Bangladesh. Why is that? Cheap labor and in fact poor labor laws. They're able to extract 12, 14, 16 hours work shift by paying lesser money. But just they'll put the brand logo and they'll sell it at a very high cost. This is also negative. This leads to exploitation. So conventionally speaking, globalization had a lot of benefits that we are aware of. Okay, but in the current times, what is the challenge? Abhi kya hai? Over reliance is there on China. China has a big manufacturing base. Over reliance on China, and we saw that when China sneezes, the world catches cold. Now, before I tell you and make you write, please remember a few things. See, what does globalization say? You are welcome to work in any part of the world. Okay, so what was happening? A lot of the people from China and India, they were going to US. Many people were going to Europe. They were able to get good jobs, right? Why was that? One, people were skilled. Second, they were comparatively cheaper. Even if they got very high packages in those countries, the traditional person was more expensive. So companies will hire by efficiency. Yes or no? अब क्या होने लगा? Slowly, steadily, this led to alienation. So if I look at globalization, देखो, if I ask you, has globalization benefited? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. So globalization has led to positive, but I will say elites benefited, right? But normal people did not benefit as much. If there is elite benefit, what will be the issue? People will have grievances. People who have lost jobs, they will say what? The foreigners go outside. So we will see negatives of globalization. We will see the demands or more and more rise of xenophobia. What is xenophobia? Fear of the outsiders. Right? Now, if you are not able to counter them through skill, you will say these people can lead to security issues. Right? Many things can be there. Slowly, steadily, we see a rise of economic nationalism. जैसे कि very common, if Trump says this, I'm using this again and again. MAGA. What is MAGA? Making America great again. is built on the belief that the locals will get more jobs. The outsiders, what did he do? He has put a very high fees on H1B visa. What will that do? Lesser people will come. And एक और argument ये भी है कि now when US has already saturated most of the posts, now they are stopping it. They did not stop earlier when it was for their benefit. And second, this is also a populistic and a political move. The companies will always focus on efficiency. They will not simply hire somebody because they are only from that territory. They will hire, now they can hire from anybody. You have seen the rise of remote work, the rise of gig work. Why gig work is on the rise? It gives flexibility to the employer. Hire and fire can happen. And it gives flexibility to the employee as well. So देखो, एक तो challenge है xenophobia. एक challenge क्या है? Economic nationalism. What is another challenge? Another challenge like we saw is weaponized interdependence. I'm just giving a hypothetical example. India is known as pharmacy of the world. Huge amounts of medicines we make in India. Okay? You will be shocked to know 70 to 80% of raw material of that vaccine comes from China. 70 to 80% of the raw material, medicine में हम उसको बोलते हैं API, active pharmaceutical ingredient. 70 to 80% of API of medicines comes from China. अब आप मुझे बताओ, someday if the relations between India and China are not great, and what if China stops the export of API? Will we be able to make these medicines? No. क्या होगा? When we say ourselves to be pharmacy of the world, आप कहोगे सर टैग भी गलत है. We have to focus on our domestic capacity, which is why over reliance specifically in strategic sector is not good. What will be a strategic sector? Anything security related, anything long term. Economic में okay, you can say you are bringing something and we are getting it. Trade can happen, import, export. But in essential sectors, important sectors, will this lead to a challenge? Yes. So when I'm looking at globalization, the conventional belief was that it will lead to democratization of jobs. It will bring a lot of prosperity, a lot of peace. Has that happened? Nahin. Kyun? All the benefits have been cornered by the elites. Right? The developing countries ke kya hua? Resources have been extracted, very limited money has been given to them. It has created discontent. And remember, discontent of globalization is seen both in developed country also, developing country also. US में भी protest होते हैं, which is why populist leaders are coming in. Populist leader क्या बोलेंगे? ठीक है, we will give you jobs. And developing countries में भी protest है. They are also getting exploited. So in some sense, globalization has united both developed and developing countries. क्यों? Exploitation दोनों में हो रहा है. The nature of exploitation is different. Conceptually, I hope you're clear on this. Okay. Now we'll write this. It happens, and it has been happening since a very long time. Which is why, if you know, NIEO first demand क्या थी? What was the first demand of NIEO? एक बार चेक करो, आपके नोट्स पे लिखा है. The very first demand of NIEO. If you're able to find it in your notes, वो भी एक टास्क होता है नोट्स में चीज ढूंढ पाना. मिला? क्या है पहली डिमांड? अभी मिला ही नहीं होगा. Sovereignty over natural resources. अब आपको समझ आ रहा है? This demand was made in 1974. Why is that? One should have a sovereignty over the natural resources. That is also true. ठीक है? Otherwise, it will lead to exploitation of natural resources. Fine? Okay. Now, change the paragraph and write. देखो, now globalization has become more selective. Now the globalization has become more selective, strategic, and security driven. So nature of globalization has changed. Globalization has become more selective, strategic, and security driven. Selective means it is now सबके लिए नहीं है. The scope has reduced. Strategic means now countries are actively wanting to reduce the dependence on China. We saw US Chips Act. Yes? What is the aim of US Chips Act? Reduce the dependence on China. Okay? So, here right. देखो, states are no longer asking. States are no longer asking. Inverted commas पे लिखो, where is the production cheapest? Where is production cheapest? But also asking where is the production safest? Where is the production safest? ठीक है, देखो full stop, देखो this has led to, and now we'll see some keywords. This has led to friend shoring, near shoring, friend shoring, near shoring, China +1 strategy, friend shoring, all these are good keywords. Near shoring, China +1 strategy, chips control, sanctions, chips control, sanctions, and new industrial policies. New industrial policies. Bracket में for your understanding लिखो, जैसे को India's PLI, make in India. India's PLI, what is PLI? Production linked incentives. So what is happening? Countries are making new industrial policies, which is focusing their own development. Now, I will explain to you these terms. Conventionally, the idea is globalization. Anybody can do trade with anybody. Friend shoring means I am only trading with my friends. I am only procuring with my friends. I trust these friends. What is near shoring? People who are very close. I'm not taking it from outside. Right? China +1. What is the meaning of China +1? Alternative to China. Okay? So when I'm saying China +1, the West sees India as a alternative also. The West sees India as an alternative. क्यों होगा ऐसा China +1 में? Because China is extremely dominant. India can also become an alternative in this. So China +1 strategy है क्या? That India can become an alternative, for example, to Chinese dominance. Right? अब इसके नीचे लिखो, लिखो earlier it was said when America sneezes, the word catches cold. लिखो मैंने इसलिए बोला earlier it was said that when America sneezes, the word catches cold. Full stop. Today, China's centrality in manufacturing and supply chains, China's centrality in manufacturing and supply chains means that when China sneezes, the world catches cold. When China sneezes, the world catches cold. The word catches cold. Here's the paragraph. Now write, Lego. There is also a rise of economic nationalism Full stop. States are using subsidies. Tariffs, domestic manufacturing schemes. To protect their sensitive sectors. Examples. Can you give me examples to this? अभी लिखे हमने. देखो USA's Chips Act. EU is European Union. EU's industrial policy. China's self-reliance strategy. And India's Atmanirbhar Bharat / PLI, production linked incentives. USA का Chips Act, EU's industrial policy, China's self-reliance strategy, and India's Atmanirbhar Bharat. Okay. Then write. Globalization has also led to movement of risks and crisis. Risk and crisis. So earlier ideas were moving, people were moving. Now risk and crisis is also moving. We'll simply say problem without passport wala point. Many problems now travel, inverted commas, without passports. Many problems now travel without passports. Put a dash, such as COVID-19, climate change. अब ये सारी borderless problems हैं. COVID-19, climate change, cyber threats, terrorism, misinformation, and supply chain disruption. Misinformation and supply chain disruption. everything. Internal security ki jitne bhi issues hai, money laundering, all of that. Because money laundering will operate through, like I give you example of D company, right? Any of the terrorist groups, they will also do money laundering. They will have international hawala markets, so they will do that. Okay. Isliye when we say any problem now will, there's a term that is used as butterfly effect. Butterfly effect means जो भी चीज connected होंगी, the negative impact of that is going to be huge. The positive impact is also good, but negative impact is also huge because everything is interconnected. Okay. Now to end this, just write it. देखो the conclusion लिखेंगे इसका. देखो the emerging world order is witnessing. The emerging world order is witnessing a shift in both power distribution. Emerging world order is witnessing a shift. It's witnessing a shift in both power distribution and globalization. And both of these themes are very important. Power distribution, like we saw, right? New Cold War 2.0, etc. And even globalization is changing. And globalization, full stop, likho. Globalization is moving away from open market optimism globalization is moving away from open market optimism to economic nationalism, comma, de-risking, and weaponized interdependence. De-risking and weaponized interdependence. So stop, likho. The free trade is being replaced by friend shoring. Free trade is being replaced by friend shoring, chips control, sanctions, full stop. Thus the new world order is not deglobalized. Some people say, is it deglobalization? We're saying it is not deglobalized, but reglobalized through the logic of geopolitics. Reglobalized through the logic of geopolitics. What does it mean? Globalization is also to be viewed from geopolitics. Globalization is not different. Earlier globalization was what? Everybody can do trade. हमने अभी क्या लिखा? The globalization has become selective. It has become strategic. So now countries are simply not just asking where is the cheapest form of production. They're also saying where is it safest. Countries are now looking into power equations. USA, for example, that is why PAC, Silica, etc. makes a lot of sense today. आज की class is very much from the international perspective. Major दो ही undercurrents हैं, the changing world order and globalization. And we have seen even the talks of new Cold War. Any questions and topics which comes from these dimensions, you revise your notes, you will be able to write a very good answer. Right? Now, write a question to practice before the next class, because our next class is now going to happen abhi kuch after, I think tomorrow you'll have your geography class, etc. So I want you write at least this question. Okay, this is a question of the last year itself. So write down the question. In fact, I'll give you 2 questions to practice. One will be a PYQ and one will be a question I'll create on the spot. Let us write the PYQ which has come. लिखो इन्वर्टेड कॉमास में, लिखो with the waning of globalization, with the waning of globalization, comma, post Cold War world, with the waning of globalization, post Cold War world is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. It is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. This question, if you've done the first 3 classes well and today's class well, you will be able to write a very good answer. In fact, you can even write if I ask you even a tougher question, that is globalization dead? आप उसको भी लिख सकते हो. We are saying the globalization is not dead. It has only re-globalized itself from the prism of geopolitics. This is the first question. Second, लिखो, this is a relatively easy question. Vanning, अब नहीं, ये ढूंढो, अब ये थोड़ी हर चीज में बताऊंगा. Waning, I actually wanted to say, many of you will not know what is waning, and then you'll think of waning rhymes with winning. Answer बनाएंगे, but that's not correct. Okay. Okay. So waning, you have to think of. If you just know the essence of the question, can anybody guess what is waning? बताओ, पढ़ो ध्यान से इस क्वेश्चन को पढ़ो. And see the overall, if you've read the topic, you will know the essence of the term waning. Rising, okay. So, bilkul sahi hai. Somebody saying rising, somebody saying decreasing. Polar opposites. Only one is correct. Rising. Second part padho question ka. And rise the last term. Sovereign nationalism और globalization क्या साथ साथ जाएगा? नहीं जाएगा. That decreasing now, तो अच्छा ठीक है. Answer is decreasing. ठीक है. Exam में you will not get these kind of hints. But चलो, now it is decreasing, but still you will try to write it. In GS2, I am telling you, you will see specialized use of keywords. Many people after giving GS2, they say the language asked in papers was difficult. So you have to keep up. Fine. In my lectures, I will ensure that you will have proper vocabulary. ठीक? I will use that kind of language. I will of course simplify it so that you understand. But जो भी ऐसे terms आपको समझ में नहीं आ रहे हैं, okay? If you're able, simple है, Google it. Some of you, उसको इसकी definition वहीं पे लिखो. Okay, first question is this. Second question, relatively easier, please write. You got new Cold War 2.0. First question is 10 marker. Second question is also 10 marker. This is the practice question. First question is the UPSC PYQ 2025. Second question, new Cold War 2.0 is being fought. New Cold War 2.0 is being fought through chips, AI, and supply chains. Comment. This is also 10 marker. And write the third one. New Cold War 2.0. इससे थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा टफर सवाल होता है. If I would have said, how is it different from new Cold War of the previous times? यहाँ पे it is more explicit. It is fought through chips, AI, and supply chains. ठीक है? And write the last question. This is perhaps a relatively easy question, but I'm saying this question I will not be surprised if you see this in the upcoming mains also, 2026 or 2027. Analyze the relevance of NAM. Third question, analyze the relevance of NAM in the 21st century. Very simple. Analyze the relevance of NAM in the 21st century. All these three are 10 markers. Fine. Analyze the relevance of NAM in 21st century. Okay? You've had 3 classes. Whatever you revise from the classes, if you're not able to write a coherent answer, koi baat nahi, points likho. Okay? Roughly the answer will have an introduction. 10 markers mein introduction will be brief. You have a body wherein you tell the core points. You have to see the parts of the question and you have to write supporting content. If you want, you use your notes. Notes dekh ke bhi likho, chalega. Jo nahi likh pa raha hai. If you're new, if you are very new to answer writing, fine. But try to attempt. IR mein, many times what happens, you feel very good in the class. Sir, bahut acha lag raha hai class mein, right? So many good things we are learning. But after the class, when it comes to answer writing and when you look at the questions, again, you're wondering. So answer writing is a practice that you have to do again and again. Fine. So when we meet in the next class, that is class number 4, I would want you to come with this. Those of you who will write, I will also discuss your questions, okay, after the class also. That also gives you a slight push to actually write and put pen to paper. Okay? At least jo aayenge, make sure apni copy laiega. I have this habit of checking and then verifying. So I'll see whether you've put in your hard work or not. Fine. That is all for today's class. The remaining topics, doctrine and India's neighborhood. So class number 4, in case somebody is curious, many people ask, the next class mein kya hoga? Next class is India's neighborhood. Okay. I will start India's neighborhood by first telling you India's neighborhood policy. And then we will start with China, Pakistan. That will be done for the next class. Okay. Thank you so much. People who have been watching this online, you can also practice the questions that I've shared and I've talked about. That will give you an idea. And these 3 classes which were there on YouTube are shared in a manner so that you get to know how we teach and at least how the topics are being covered. In these foundation classes, you will find a lot of PYQ relevance, a lot of linkage of current affairs, and which is very much, let's say, practical in nature. Fine. So howsoever has been experienced, especially for the people who are watching this online, also drop us a comment so that we get to know that whether you are on the right track or not. Okay. And as we move ahead in the classes, I'll also be sharing my contact and how you can reach out for if you want to have any doubts or discuss with me. Fine. So that is all for today's class. We'll now meet in the next class. IR's next class, you will be notified. Your class will be on Monday, the next 3 days, like the classes we are happening. Okay. Okay then. Timings most probably will go to the older timings. Okay. Because my classes then will end. So that will then be sorted. Fine. Okay.